So we're going to be talking about mobile learning YouTube style, and the thing that I want you to keep in mind as we go through this today is it's YouTube style mobile learning. It's not necessarily about creating mobile learning on YouTube, although we're going to talk about the application of what we can learn from YouTube videos that are practical in the learning space. So if you're looking at this from a Drupal perspective, how many of you are developers? Are learning to be developers? How many of you, well, what is everybody else doing? What are you looking to get out of the conference?
Site building content.
Okay, site building content.
We want to implement, we've got modules that we've implemented, but we don't exactly know, we're always looking at the community to see how we can tweak it to do this and that. And
exactly, right. Okay, so how do we use Drupal effectively in our environment or in our organization, right? Does that pretty much cover everybody else? Okay.
New applications?
New applications, say more about that.
Of Drupal, where people...
Okay, good, perfect. So what I'm going to be talking about today is what I was talking about in the keynote, the need and kind of what we're doing from a practical application standpoint. And then immediately following my session today, we have someone who's going to be coming in and talking about the Drupal side of it, the development side of it, and how you can make this happen in the system. So it's kind of a combo deal that, that we've put together for this session. But I want to start out with an example. This is my son, Ian. And Ian was 7 in this video. He is 9 now. And I'll tell you a little bit about my kids. So I have 3 boys. I have an 18-year-old. We won't talk about him because he's a teenager now, and you know how that goes. But I have an 8-year-old and a 9-year-old. So this is my now 9-year-old. At the time, he was 7. And Ian is, as the middle child, he's very much like me in that he wants to do training stuff. So from the time he was 6 years old, I've had him editing audio in like Adobe Audition. He helps me build e-learning courses. Super smart. What I found out was that he and his youngest brother, Nathaniel, were taking my phone into their older brother's room, and they were recording videos about their superheroes, and they were uploading them to my YouTube channel. And it was talking about their superheroes and what that would make their superheroes better. So I have this Spider-Man. It would be better if he also shot webs out of his feet, right? So things like that. And of course, when I found out about it, going to my corporate YouTube channel, I said, rock on, that's awesome, right? So I encouraged it, and I started their own YouTube channel. So now they have their own channel, and it's Ian's New Toys Program. That's what it's called. Well, Ian went through a phase a while back where he was into these Origami Yoda books. And that's where have you heard of these? Okay, so it's a series. And if you're into Star Wars, you might appreciate some of this. But what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a video about a video that Ian created on his own. So in this video, he took the iPad into the living room and just started recording. I don't ever know what they're doing. I just let them record whatever and upload it. So I usually don't find out until later. So when I found this was right before I was developing a YouTube-style mobile learning session for DevLearn in Vegas a year ago. And I thought that this was extremely applicable to what we were going to talk about today. So let's see if this actually works. Where's my hand? Oh, that's not good. How about this? We'll just turn it up loud and see if that works instead. Whoa, where'd it go? All right. I don't know what's really going on here. It's the speed watch of the presentation. Oh, it's not coming over at all. See, I told you we would have audio issues. Oh, yay, help. That's always good.
I'm willing to jump into the fray.
Okay,
Right
so
behind you is
an audio thing, a button.
Mute.
So let's do
Laptop.
this.
What's that? Yep. Simplifies this laptop. The volume on your machine's up. Oh, wait, I'm hearing something.
Oh, crap, why is it doing that? Okay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome
Yay.
back to the new quiz program. I am right now into origami. Okay, I would like to go with the Origami Yoda, but I really forgot it before I did this episode. But I can't. Now, that's a very good book. It's called The Strange Case of Origami Yoda. That's one episode, okay? There's 5 books. Anyway, I am into Origami Yoda. I'm going to teach you how to make one. Okay, so first, a tip. There was this guy that made this, the Grand Yoda. The Grand Yoda was one of the finest Yodas I've ever made. I couldn't stick my finger through the hole like you said. But if you're watching this episode, I'd like to tell you a great thing. Yeah. I didn't get your whole thing right, but yeah, you're one of the greats. Never mind. This is the Origami Yoda I made. Right? There's you can learn how to make a real Origami Yoda in the fourth book. In the fourth book, Art 2D2. Art 2D2. Okay? So, you do need some tape, but you don't have to use some. I would get some tape. I'm not going to use some. So, if you want to, get some tape, and I'll show you how to make. No, never mind. Alright, I'm going to try to get you through this. I'm telling you, so listen carefully. Grab a piece of paper, cut out a little triangle, just a little one, okay? Fold it up, cut off the ends that are behind, draw some lines on it, color it green, put it in Yoda's pocket, make sure it's little, and make sure it doesn't hit the face, so you can see the face, and there, okay? Using this piece of paper, you will be able to make this puppet. Alright, if you have origami paper, brown on one side and green on the other side, start brown side up, okay? Start with the brown side, alright? So, you gotta if you've got a long piece of paper like this one, and a long like that, I recommend you to cut it. I recommend you to cut it in the triangle. Now, try to make it in the middle.
It's a triangle.
All right, so try
apparently.
in the middle.
It's a rectangle.
Science and spirit, interesting. All right, if your name is Colby Harpine, please watch this movie. So, you want to figure it out? I figured it out. Okay? So here's how you do it. You fold this little part, like right here, down, okay?
I'm actually going to stop it. So it's about 10 minutes. And the interesting thing about this video is that when you're done watching the video, you actually can make an Origami Yoda when he's done. But what we see a lot of on the internet when we see YouTube videos, it's similar to this. So someone is kind of walking you through some process and they're showing you how to do whatever it is they're doing. And he got this idea because they watch kids playing video games on YouTube all the time. I don't understand it, but it's different, right? Well, what happened was Ian came to me and he said, Mom, I really want you to help me make this Origami Yoda. It's really hard. And he brings me this video. It's a 30-minute YouTube video. And he said, can you sit down and do it? I've never done anything origami in my life. Other than when I was a kid, I probably made one of those little thingies. But I never did anything origami. Well, I was able to make this guy. So this is the Origami Yoda I made out of one piece of paper, first try. It took me about an hour to make it. But my first try, I was able to make the little Origami Yoda. Look, he's even got a little cane and everything out of one piece of paper. I was shocked at the fact that I could do this with no previous experience, just from watching a YouTube video. So let's take a little bit of contrast to see what are the things that Ian did in his video that we see that he may have done well and things that he could have done differently to be effective when we're training through this type of format, through a video format. So starting out, I wanted to ask you guys, do you think that video is practical for training? How many of you have used YouTube to do something that you didn't know how to do before? So if you're learning how to do anything in Drupal, you probably have for sure. But, you know, going out and fixing something on your car or building something or crafting or whatever it is. Well, one of the things that I found interesting when I started to do some research was that there was a person that is a freelance writer, and her name is Chapman. And she wrote this about videos. She says that they are not good for training, and this is why. They're dry, they're boring, there's no interaction. Complex subjects are difficult to teach on videos, and they're very difficult to find. So I want to first say that I wholeheartedly disagree with this, but there is a reason why people say things like this about video. So let's look and see what those things are and how we can do it differently. So you know who this is, right? Oscar the Grouch. Right, in Sesame Street, one of the things that I found interesting was about, I think it was 4 years ago, I had a friend of mine who's from the Dominican Republic who told me that his entire family, when they moved here, learned how to speak English using Sesame Street, which I thought was a joke. I didn't believe that. There's no way you learned how to speak English from Sesame Street. Upon further research, however, I found that there is data to support that people do this. And not only here in the US, but also in other countries. And that the data is showing that children who watch Sesame Street are better readers and learn language more quickly and have higher scores than those who don't. So I thought, well, why would that be? That doesn't really, I want to understand why that's true. And so you can see things, I mean, even the over 90% of U.S. parents reported a change in their children's interest in counting, sorting, matching as a result of the Math is Everywhere outreach movement. So there's a ton of data on Sesame Street's website that talks about how effective video can be for training. So this is what I found in researching this, is that video works best if you play along. So if you remember that first article that we talked about where she said there's no interaction. Interaction does not mean that you are clicking around. It doesn't mean that you're doing something. Interaction happens in your mind, right? So have you ever heard of that light bulb going off? That's the interaction. That's where the interaction happens, is what you're thinking when things start to make sense or click. And so how many of you have seen Dora the Explorer or have kids that watch it 24 hours a day? So what Dora says whenever on Dora, it's a Nickelodeon TV show, and she's teaching children Spanish, and she'll say it with me, and she'll say a Spanish word, and then your kids all say the word, and she talks to them. It's kind of weird, but it works really well because you're playing along. So what does that teach us about video for learning? Well, whenever you're setting up training type videos, they need to have an aspect of you interacting with them or playing along. So there should be opportunities for them to do whatever it is that you're doing. So if I'm up here presenting to you right now about how to develop some kind of module in Drupal, and I'm telling you how to do it, is that going to be effective? Why? Because I'm not doing it. I'm not showing you how to do it. So one of the things that I bring up often is there's this thing in the learning industry called learning styles, which is not true, by the way. It's not right. Because what that teaches is that people have an ability to learn a certain way over others. So you might say, I am a visual learner, or I am an auditory learner. The reason why that's not true is if I tell you that I want to show you or teach you where Africa is, if I tell you or I write out some directions, it's not effective as doing what? Showing you on a map or a globe, right? So it's not about you being a visual learner. It's just that's the best way to learn what that content is. So keep that in mind. Video might not always be the best way to train something, but if it's something that you're teaching someone how to do, you know, if it's some kind of practical application, as long as you're showing them how to do it, then it's going to be effective because they can see that in practice. And talking about topics that are dry and boring, how many of you have worked with training topics or content that's very dry and boring? Yes, I would say most content in its own right is dry and boring. The thing that makes content interesting is context, whatever context that you apply to it. So if we look at dry and boring content, if you're familiar with TED, the organization that does TED Talks, they have a site called TED Ed that was a result of flipped classrooms. And I know I mentioned flipped classrooms earlier, but that's the concept of having your lecture be self-paced. So your lecture is your homework, and then when you come into the classroom, you're actually doing something with your instructor. And traditionally, you came into a classroom and you listened to a lecture like this, and then you went away and did it with no help and freaked out. And you went home and said, parents, can you please help me with my homework? No, I don't remember what that stuff is. And if you have kids right now that are learning Common Core concepts, which are good concepts, it's good in theory, but in practice it's very difficult because parents don't know how to support it. So if you look at TED Ed, they have some really great examples of teaching content that is either dry and boring or very complex, which addresses the other thing that the woman had said in her blog. If it's very complex content, I would argue that that is one of the best candidates for YouTube videos. Because if it's complex, you have someone guiding you through that content and showing you the practical application as they go through it. So let's look at an example. Do I have fans of math in here? Okay. I just like what it can do for me, but I'm not a big fan of math. So this is a video from TED Ed on algorithms.
What's an algorithm? In computer science, an algorithm is a set of instructions for solving some problem, step by step. Typically, algorithms are executed by computers, but we humans have algorithms as well. For instance, how would you go about counting the number of people in a room? Well, if you're like me, you'd probably point at each person, one at a time, and count up from 0. 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. Well, that's an algorithm. In fact, let's try to express it a bit more formally in pseudocode, English-like syntax that resembles a programming language. Let n equal 0. For each person in room, set n equal to n plus 1. How to interpret this pseudocode? Well, line 1 declares, so to speak, a variable called n and initializes its value to 0. This just means that at the beginning of our algorithm, the thing with which we're counting has a value of 0. After all, before we start counting, we haven't counted anything yet. Calling this variable n is just a convention. I could have called it most anything. Now, line 2 demarks the start of a loop, a sequence of steps that will repeat some number of times. So in our example, the step we're taking is counting people in the room. Beneath line 2 is line 3, which describes exactly how we'll go about counting. The indentation implies that it's line 3 that will repeat. So what the pseudocode is saying is that after starting at 0, for each person in the room, we'll increase n by 1. Now, is this algorithm correct? Well, let's bang on it a bit. Does it work if there are 2 people in the room? Let's see. In line 1, we initialize n to 0. For each of these 2 people, we then increment n by 1. So on the first trip through the loop, we update n from 0 to 1. On the second trip through that same loop, we update n from 1 to 2. And so, by this algorithm's end, n is 2, which indeed matches the number of people in the room.
Okay, so for this right now, I look at it and I start to glaze over. Do you know why? How many of us need to know what an algorithm is right now? Probably none of us. If you either already knew what it was or you don't really care right now. So that leads to one of the things we'll talk about in a moment. But if you think about as a parent helping a child with homework, I would much prefer having something like this rather than somebody bringing me home a textbook with some instructions on it, and I have no way to relate what that actually means, unless I can remember back to when I was in whatever grade they teach algorithms. So how do I get started with practicing some of these concepts, and what other concepts are important? Well, if we look at video for mobile, because this is specifically about using video in a mobile environment where people are on the go, where people are away from a desktop computer, and they need access to information real time. So one of the things that's really helpful is a SME recording, so a subject matter expert recording, which captures some of that tacit knowledge. So if you have, Bob over in the corner who's really good at doing this one thing, capturing that knowledge, having him use a tool to capture that video, and we'll talk about tools in a moment, capture that video so that we can share it with others, and having accessibility to that no matter where you are. And then also product knowledge is a good candidate for mobile, and it's a good candidate for video, because it helps you, say, as a salesperson, if a salesperson's out on the road and they need information before they go meet with a potential client, they can look at a product and see, okay, what are the sales factors of this product? What are the things that are most important? What's my I'm not a salesperson, but it's the statement that makes it better than everybody else. Market differentiation. What did you say? Yeah, all of that stuff. Value proposition, that's what I was looking for. And then step-by-step processes, that's another really great candidate for mobile, and it's one that most of us are probably most familiar with. If you've used video on YouTube to learn how to do something, those step-by-step processes are very helpful. So what are the things that we need to think about as we're getting started in developing video for mobile? One thing that we need to think about is being imperfect. So one of the things in the learning space that is a challenge is everyone thinks that we need to have some production video or quality video, that we need to have it scripted, that it needs to be perfect. But the thing is that being imperfect is actually what folks look for when they're trying to learn how to do something. They're looking for the most real situation that they can find, the closest thing to what it is they're trying to learn. So if I'm going through YouTube to find a video to teach me how to install a toilet, I'm not going to look at the video that has somebody sitting at a desk, that has a little splash behind them, the green screen or whatever, and they're like, I'm here today to talk to you about installing a toilet, and they have on their suit, and they're talking about this stuff. I want the dude with his butt crack showing in the back that's over there installing a toilet, right? So remembering that being imperfect is actually a good quality in a video and what your learners would look for. What is this?
An apple.
How do you know?
Looks like one.
It looks like one? Okay. So it's pretty clear that's an apple. What does that say?
Apple.
Okay. So in the learning space, often what we'll do is this. Why do we do that?
Reinforce.
So we do that because we are condescending? No. We do that because we have been trained that whenever you have an object or an image or something, we feel like we have to give you a description for it. But there's this thing that is called a design affordance. And what that does is it means I know by what something looks like, I know what it is. And I have some context just because of the visual representation. So that door back there, what kind of door, if I look at that door, how do I know how to open that door? It has a handle. What do I do with that handle? Do I push it? But I can tell from that handle, because it's, it goes out, it's a long handle, I can tell I need to grab it, and I know because of the type of handle, what it looks like, I know I need to turn it, right? So I'm going to do something, I'm either going to push it or pull it, whatever works, right? So there are certain design affordances that let me know what something is or what it does just by the way it looks. And why this is important when it comes to video and even software design is that there are times when people will say, okay, let's put this home button up here and let's have it say home underneath it. Do we need to do that? No, we don't, because people know a home button is a home button. What about a floppy disk? What does a floppy disk mean? Right? So I have this little floppy disk. I'm not going to draw it right because I'm not good at remembering what things look like. I've seen floppy disks. I actually remember when floppy disks were floppy. So if I take this floppy disk and I tell my son, what does this mean? Well, not this because this is a terrible drawing, but if I ask my son, what does that, I think it's got like a little square, not a circle. That's the problem. Yes, it's a washing machine. Just leave me alone. No. Okay, so, but in all, if I'm looking at that with my children and I say, what does this do? They're going to tell me that's what I click to save. They don't know what a floppy disk is. They don't know what that means, but they know that image means to save something. So it's a good concept to keep in mind when we're developing videos, because there are certain design affordances that we can leverage to have a visual representation of something without labeling it, without having these text captions that pop up that say everything that you're showing. And from a psychological perspective, it's important because you can have this is cognitive dissonance. Essentially, you're showing them something and you're asking them to read it at the same time. And so it can cause a conflict, mental conflict, when you're asking them to do two things at the same time. For this, it's a little bit more straightforward, but if I had a long bullet of text that said, this is an apple, apples are good to eat, then it would not be as helpful. So this is an example from Jane Bozarth. And one of the things that you notice about video is that people often will say, well, I can't get any data from it. I know that people can see it, but how do I know they found it useful? Well, this is a tip that Jane talks about in one of her books, Social Media for Trainers. And this video she found, this woman had gone through a video, and at the end, she just put a question at the end of her video and said, what would you do if you knew you could not fail? And she leveraged the comment section of YouTube to get that feedback from her audience. So that's a good way to start to capture some of that data informally through video. We'll talk a little bit more about data in a minute. All right, so have you heard the concept that videos should only be 2 minutes or less? Now, when we talk about mobile, what's really important when it comes to mobile is that things don't take up too much bandwidth. They're not too heavy. If you look at things like flat design and that kind of stuff, we all know about how difficult it is to make sure that things don't crash and burn on a mobile device. One of the things that frustrate me is when we talk about learning and we talk about how much or how long someone can pay attention, right? So I've heard people say, well, your learners are only going to pay attention for 30 seconds, or they're only going to pay attention for 2 minutes. If that is true, then how can you go and sit through a Lord of the Rings trilogy that's like 9 hours long and be there hardcore the whole time? How is that possible? If physiologically you can only stay attuned to something for 30 seconds or 2 minutes. Well, it's not true, essentially. And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about the algorithm. Because you don't have a need for that right now, then of course it's boring. You don't need it right now. But if you needed what's a challenge that you're facing right now? Maybe a Drupal challenge that you're facing. Responsive design. So if I said I have an excellent video for you on responsive design, it will teach you everything you need to know about responsive design. You've just signed a client contract to develop a responsive site for them, and it should be based off of Drupal. And I tell you, I have all the information you need in this video. It's 3 hours long. If you're sitting there building it, what's that?
It's too short.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. That's definitely true. But if you need it, you're going to sit there and you're going to watch through the whole thing. It's just like the 30-minute friggin' Yoda origami thing that I built. I watched a 30-minute video on making a little origami thing out of paper. So it's just as long as there's a need for it and someone's interested in it, they will pay attention for as long as it's still relevant to them. So this is a good example of using breaks, visual breaks in video. And when we talk about looking at the process type videos where you've got a step 1, step 2, step 3, you can add visuals in to help trigger to someone if they're pausing, fast forward, they're using the scrubber to kind of go forward and rewind through a process, to give them a visual break point to say, okay, I'm on step 2, I need to go back to step 2 again. And it doesn't have to say step 1 or step 2, it could say whatever the name of that process is that you're about to cover. But it's good to have those transitions if you're going into a new step, so that way if it is a longer video, I can quickly scrub to the point that I need. Now, there are tools that will allow you to bookmark videos and things, but this is a very lo-fi way to get to that same end, is just having a visual splash page. So analytics. Along those same lines, when we look at video and how we can capture data, so I'm an evaluation geek and I love data, and one of the things that's very important to me is when I set up any kind of training solution, I want to be able to pull some kind of information out of it to see if it was effective. And with video, it is a little bit difficult if you don't plan for that in advance. Well, some of the things that we have access to that are absolutely free are things like Google Analytics, where if I'm hosting a video on my website, I can see where people in the world are hitting it, when they're hitting it, what time of day, what system they're using, what platform they're on. I mean, I can see such micro data about individuals that are accessing that training. And if I'm hosting it on a platform like YouTube or Vimeo, I can get even more advanced analytics, like what point are they dropping off in the video? If I have a 5-minute video, is everybody dropping off around the 2-minute point? Maybe there's something wrong there or something that I need to change. So I can start to look at some of that analytic data to evaluate whether or not those videos are helpful or successful. And adding that context, like using a comments field, will help just give you a little bit of reinforcement when you're starting to analyze that data. So let's talk a little bit about tools. If we're creating video for mobile, we talked a little bit about compression. We talked about needing to have access to information quickly and on demand. So there are some tools here that meet a lot of the needs we've talked about. The first one is Adobe Presenter. Is anyone familiar with Presenter? So this is a fabulous tool for capturing tacit knowledge for SMEs. And what it does is it gives them the ability to record themselves through a webcam and their desktop at the same time. So, and they have complete control. So after they've recorded the video, they essentially just push a button. It records everything at the same time. And when they're done, they can go back and edit it to say, I want to show me talking, I want to show the screen, or I want to show both. So it's a good way to support flipped classrooms, but it's also a good way to support capturing some of that information from people that may not be training people, but they want to be able to record a process for others to learn from. The second one up here is Adobe Captivate. Has anyone heard of Captivate? Okay, so that's a tool that I use pretty frequently. Adobe Captivate is great for simulation-based training. So it goes back to RoboDemo. And essentially that tool, now it's become this PowerPoint to e-learning mess that I don't agree with. But, you know, Captivate originally, what they do best is they screen capture and capture keystrokes and, you know, whatever it is that you're doing in a process. It's a great software simulation tool. So not only does it record it as a demo, but you can actually interact with it and do processes along with that content. And Captivate has an output to mobile now. It has an output to HTML5. And so you can not only build mobile compliant software simulations, but you can also build responsive projects using Captivate, the newest version of Captivate. Animoto is another one. I love this one. And I actually want to show you an example of this because it's a really nice tool that was used by some teachers here locally to have their students do their summer book reading reports. So she did something a little bit different. She said, for your summer book reading, whenever you're done, I want you to do a trailer in Animoto. And these were 6th and 7th graders. I want you to do a trailer for your book. And I'll show you what it looks like so you can see. And now I have the spinny wheel of death. Oh, you can't see it, but I can see it. Ooh. The rainbow wheel. But it was really nice. This tool is actually free. And so, oh no, cannot locate the internet. Let's see. Let's do this. I gotta go to a wedding, you guys. Think that I can wear what I've got on? I'm gonna be in a hurry. Let's see if I can get back into this. Oh, it's already over here. Where is my mouse? This is I've practiced this presentation so many times just for you guys. Can't you tell? No, it's not down there. We can try it one more again. If not, it doesn't. We don't have to do it.
Just trying to go out to the website.
Yeah. It's a link. See, look. Ooh.
Yeah, is he already logged into Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
Wi-Fi looks like it's connected, but they have a browser piece that you have to say yes to or something.
Yeah, you have to go to your browser and log
This is unacceptable.
If you pull up a browser, it might.
Okay. Let's see. This is all going into my permanent record, too. See that? How much time do I have left? Am I done already? 10 minutes? Okay, well, we'll skip it. You guys are going to get this later.
You can try it at the end and see if it'll pop
That's a fabulous idea. Okay. Well, whatever.
So we need to have you logged into the KSU network in order for you to go.
I give up. Yeah. Oh well. We'll see if we can get it to work. I can share it with you guys. I don't care. And plus, you probably want to see my son's entire video. I will. I might. I think I have to do this presentation again, actually, so I can't do that. So then the last one is Camtasia. I don't know. Oh, yeah, I can definitely do that. And I can do that right after the session. So the Camtasia example is very powerful. I actually use Camtasia more than probably anything. I use it more than Adobe Premiere. I use it quite frequently because you can get production style quality with a very quick tool, and it's pretty inexpensive. So Camtasia is just another tool to create videos. Oh crap, I didn't mean to click it. Stop clicking things. Camtasia. I really should write those up there. Camtasia. Yeah, they do. Camtasia and Snagit actually has pretty much almost as good a capability. It's just not as powerful editing tools, especially when it comes to editing audio and things. You're going to just kind of get what you get. All right. See, that's where my kid gets it from. All right. Publish settings. Eek. Okay. I'm going to just keep it very simple when it comes to publishing out. When we're talking about using YouTube-style mobile concepts, just publish to MP4. It's important to have as good compression as you possibly can, but MP4 is a widely accepted format for mobile devices. So there are a gazillion published settings that you can get into if we talk about something like Adobe Premiere Pro. But for anything like Camtasia, just know that obviously Flash doesn't work on mobile devices unless you're packaging it. Well, we won't even go down that road, but you're supposed to you should use HTML5 based. Let me just back that up. MP4s, excellent for video. There are a lot of other ways you can obviously distribute video, but using either an HTML5 output for things like Adobe type simulations or using MP4 are the two most practical ways to distribute video.
Excuse me.
Yes.
No particular screen resolution.
That's an excellent question. Yeah, so what I actually would not recommend is using HD. And so what I typically will do is like a 1024 by 768, just because it's a practical screen size, especially when you're getting into doing a lot with mobile, because that's the resolution for tablets, and it's scalable down to a mobile device. One thing it is important to remember when you're developing is that if you're going to develop something that's going to be viewed on a smartphone, especially if it's a software type simulation, it needs to be gigantic when you're developing it. And so you need to use things like pan and zoom so you can zoom into specific areas. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to see unless you have this big old monstrous iPhone. I got the 6 Plus and now I can't return it because I'm past my 14 days and I waited too long because I've been too busy. And so now I have this gigantic phone.
You'll learn to love it.
Yeah, actually, I was playing with somebody who's 6 yesterday and I was like, this is too small now, but whatever. Yeah. I know, the 6 Plus is huge. And then a friend of mine said, well, doesn't it bend? I was like, yeah, if you're a moron and you sit on it. Like, who sits on a phone? It was cracking me up was the people that were saying, well, if you have on tight pants and you sit with it in your front pocket, and I'm like, how could that be comfortable? Y'all, look, have you seen this phone? I mean, who's wearing their snazzy leather pants and putting this in their front pocket and sitting with it? Like, take it out of your pocket and put it on the table like a normal human being. It's just ridiculous. Steve does that anytime it's Apple.
We're geeks. We have ours in our front pocket.
Do you? Well, but if it was so tight that it was starting to bend, I imagine you might want to take it out. I know. Either get some pants that fit or take it out of your pocket. So how will they find it? Well, this kind of gets to what we're all here for, in it being a Drupal conference. And first, I want to go over some of the lo-fi type ways to distribute it. One would be obviously a cloud-based service. So anything like Dropbox or SkyDrive, OneDrive is what it's called. They got sued or whatever. So yeah, whatever Microsoft calls theirs now, although I don't use theirs, but Dropbox or Google Drive or a Box account or one of those. Don't put it on iCloud, especially if it's got naked pictures. You don't want to put it out there. You're going to be in trouble. But, that's a really great way to distribute video. Another way to distribute video is obviously through a web browser. One of the benefits to this is then you have that built-in analytics in the background. So as people are accessing that information, you can, as long as you're running something like Google Analytics or Flurry or something like that on your website, you can start to capture some of that analytic data and get some reporting from who's accessing your videos and how they're accessing your videos. So this is just a great way to distribute video. However, if you do not have a great server and you feel that people will be accessing your content quite a bit, this is something that actually is going to be covered in the next session, but that's something that you need to consider. So you may want to look at a service like Vimeo or YouTube, since this is a YouTube type session. One thing that's nice about YouTube is that they do have corporate accounts, so you can have a corporate YouTube account. And a nice thing about YouTube also is that they have a lot more in-depth analytics that are specific to video. So if you can use YouTube to store and distribute videos, it's great because it's not going to, they'll be able to support the bandwidth that you need. Oh, this is interesting. I didn't take this slide off. So let's skip this. I don't know what happened. I made you fancy slides too. Didn't I even email them to you? Okay. This is really not working out to be a great technology day for me. Seriously. Well, I know that it's probably uploaded to Google Drive, or it's not. Who knows anymore. Well, I did make 2 really fancy Drupal slides for you, but it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to get to them. But when we talk about where to store your content and how to store your content and access it, obviously a content management system is an excellent way to store and house content because you have control over how you tag that content, your taxonomy for that content, and you have a lot more control over your distribution. You also need to have a powerful server if you're, like we said, if you're going to have a lot of people hitting it. But what we're going to be talking about next, I think this is the end of my time, right? Yeah, so what we're going to be talking about next is how to look at Drupal as a way to organize and deliver content. And what's the specific name of your session since my slides are gone now?
So this presentation is going to be at 2:10, and it's higher education digital management, digital asset management in Drupal.
Yes, so we're going to get a damn Drupal.
So yeah, it's
digital asset management.
Yeah, so pretty much taking all this wonderful stuff like meta tagging and all that metadata that you're missing out if you throw it on Google Drive or Dropbox, and seeing how to use Drupal to build the structure there where you have all that metadata attached to your photos or your videos, so you're not having to look at papers, emails, Word documents to find all that good stuff.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
So in this session today, you've learned about lots of different principles of how you can develop these videos and what ways that you can use video to be effective for learning. And now, I guess this afternoon, are you in this room?
I am in room 174.
Just because we like to confuse you, it will not even be in here. So if you're interested in learning how you can now store and deliver that content, you can join us in room 174 later this afternoon. So does anyone have any questions before we adjourn? Yes?
People throw around the term adult learning principles a lot. I just want to hear what you might define as the adult learning principles.
So that's a great question because I think that people learn I think that people that are adults learn the same way that children learn. And so I think that the whole thing about adult learning principles really comes out of that whole respect for the learner, because people feel like you have to have more respect for adults as learners as you do for children, and I don't agree with that. And so a lot of the adult learning principles are really just learning principles. And I will tell you this, I'm not going to give you like a standard laundry list of what I think adult learning principles would contain, but I will say that it is worthwhile to do some research about some of the learning principles that we've always used, because a lot of them are totally inaccurate junk. So learning styles is an example of that. Generational learning is an example of that, because I can tell you that my 18-year-old son actually is not as technology proficient as my mother, who's an IT manager, So it doesn't necessarily matter your age. It really matters your experience and what you've been exposed to and what types of situations you've been in to need to leverage that technology. So there are lots of different things. I would encourage you all to do some research on Clark Quinn and Chad Udell. They actually did a session not too long ago on debunking learning myths, which was excellent. And I think there were 4 myths that they addressed that were grounded in adult learning principles. So it's an excellent question, and it's one that I could probably answer for the next 4 or 5 hours. But thank you very much for that. It's Clark Quinn and Chad Udell, Udell. They did a session at, oh my goodness, I think it was MLearnCon maybe last year. It may have been at something else. I can't remember now, but they did an excellent session on debunking. They did like the whole Mythbusters theme. Actually, I think they even wore lab coats, which was really cheesy, but they're both very brilliant. Anything else that I could answer for you all? Yes.
Just any thoughts about YouTube and all the advertising, and does it take people away from your presentation?
I don't turn on advertising. Yeah, so yes, advertising could take people away from your presentation, and people usually leverage the advertising piece if they have a viral video of their cats and they want to make money off of it. So once it starts hitting like 1 million or whatever, they start to use it. But it is beneficial to use the end of a YouTube video to push people to additional content. That is a useful a way to use some of those advertisements. But the whole little ads at the bottom, if you can buy into an account that you can get rid of those, then it's certainly helpful. But for me, I don't even look at them. I don't know about you guys, but I have a way of tuning things out. Obviously, with 3 children, I'm good at that. So I just don't pay attention to it if it's something that I need. And typically, those advertisements have nothing to do with what I'm trying to learn at the time, so it doesn't really matter to me. Excellent question. Anything else? Yes.
Do you know much about SCORM-based training?
I know a lot about SCORM-based training, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but maybe we can have a conversation right after this to talk a little bit about where XAPI is taking us away from the very locked down. SCORM is excellent for some things. It's a standardized delivery, a way to standardize how we deliver content to people, but I wouldn't say it's going away because it's not yet, but it's being phased out by XAPI, which is a way to get very granular data from how people interact with our courses and our content. In addition to just, I showed up and I saw this and I saw this many pages, or I made a 95 or what. I don't even use multiple choice quizzes, by the way. If you want to get into adult learning principles, I could talk about that all day. But yeah, it's just looking at evaluation the way that we really should have looked at it all along is helping us to get away from SCORM.
Okay. So the whole concept of SCORM, because we've gone with my company is one that delivers training to corporations, yes. And one of the vendors that we went with was one that they're SCORM based, and they have all the videos and capture them also well, but they're they're expensive. Mm-hmm. It's expensive to take that content and make it into a video. Anyway,
I can show you in 2 seconds how to do it. That's really cheap. So just come on up and I'll show you how to do it. You don't need a vendor to do that. Okay, so I appreciate you guys taking the time to come see me today, and I'll be around. So thank you.